Greetings, Nick with Sweetwater here, and today we're going to be taking a quick look at the Marshall Studio JTM family. These eye-catching, drool-inducing, vintage-sounding and looking beauties right here beside me. As you can see, the Studio JTM range consists of a 20-watt tube head, a vertical angle 2x12 cabinet, a 20-watt 1x12 tube combo, and a 1x12 cabinet which can be used with either the head or the combo. Furthermore, both the head and the combo can deliver either 20 watts or 5 watts of vintage Marshall tube-driven snarl. It all depends on whether you set each one to high power or low power mode via the standby switch. As for the speakers in both the combo and the two cabs, they're 65 watt 12-inch Celestion greenbacks. Now I know what you're probably thinking, my friend. Surely Celestion greenbacks would be more historically and tonally correct. Let me explain. When I spoke to the Marshall R&D team, they told me the following when they were comparing speakers. Much to their surprise, while the greenback seemed to be the obvious and logical choice, the greenback speaker just sounded richer and much more like what they expected when paired with the Studio JTM. So that's what they went for. To quote the fine fellow I spoke to, he said the following: "We just wanted to make the best product we could, and when it came to the speaker, we felt that the greenback sounded and felt right for it." Imagine that, a design team choosing a speaker by trusting their ears and fingers. What a concept! The Studio JTM Quartet are the latest additions to Marshall's Studio range, which already features 3 of the families based on classic Marshall amps from yesteryear. Let's see what they are, shall we? In chronological order, we have the following. First, the Studio Vintage, which is based on the iconic Super Lead 1959 head. Then there's the Studio Classic, which is based on the JCM 82203, the head that defined and dominated 80s metal. And of course, let's not forget the silver-clad, wait for it, Silver Jubilee offerings either. Can you say Slash? I know what you're thinking, my friend. A classic free riff into a bush part? It could well be illegal, but they work together, right? The Studio JTM head and combo capture the tonal essence of the Marshall amp that started it all in the early 60s, the fabled JTM 45, the first ever Marshall amp. JTM 45 was born in late 1962 and was created by a team of 3 bold British chaps, Ken Brann, Dudley Craven, and their fearless and forward-thinking leader, a renowned drummer named Jim Marshall. Their mission, in Jim's very own words, to make the world's first ever rock and roll amp. A bold quest indeed, but the trio was successful, as you've just heard. The story behind how the JTM 45 actually came to be is a fascinating one, but that's a topic for another video, so stay tuned to this Sweetwater channel for that historical tale. In short, the resulting head the intrepid trio created was a game changer. Not only did it launch the now world-famous Marshall amplification company, the JTM 45 also forever changed the sound of rock and roll as we now know and love it. Yes, sir, the instantly recognizable, the sound of rock Marshall is rightfully revered for, was definitely born on that glorious day in 1962. Hurrah! This legendary first ever Marshall amp currently resides under lock and key in the company's museum in their English headquarters. Here's a photograph of yours truly with that precious piece of history with a few of the wonderful Marshall amps it spawned. Oh yeah, and here's a photo of said first ever Marshall with its proud father, the late great Jim Marshall. As I'm sure you're aware, JTM is an acronym for Jim and Terry Marshall, Terry being Jim's son. As for the 45, well, that's a misnomer, my friend. A lot of people understandably assume it means the amp delivers 45 watts, but it doesn't. In reality, the JTM 45's output is around 30 watts. Brief historical detour over, let's quickly check out the features of the Studio JTM family, which has been voiced to recreate those vintage sounds that made the original JTM 45 so iconic. To that end, the preamp circuitry in both the Studio JTM 45 head and combo is identical to the one used in the critically acclaimed Marshall JTM 45 reissue. And just like said reissue, the Studio JTM offerings are all made in England. We'll talk about the power stage of the Studio JTM in a minute. First though, a guitar change via digital magic. Let's quickly check out the striking livery of this stunning looking family. The vinyl texture, gold piping and fawn fret cloth immediately take you back to that vintage JTM 45 look of the early 60s, as does the meticulously recreated Coffin Marshall logo right there. Just so you know, it's named thus because the original was apparently made by a coffin manufacturer. Not morbid at all. The silver control panel, orange jewel light and black knobs on the head and combo panels also take us back in time to when the Marshall sound first came to be. Before we take a quick tour of the Studio JTM's panels, let's quickly talk about its tube complement, shall we? Just like the original JTM 45, the Studio JTM head and combo both contain 3 12AX7 tubes and a pair of 5881 power tubes, with one of the 3 12AX7s being the phase splitter. Unlike the JTM 45 though, the Studio JTM amps do not contain a GZ34 tube rectifier. I repeat, they do not contain a tube rectifier. And as I'm sure you know, one of the cool things about the tube rectifier in the JTM 45 is the desirable sag that occurs when the amp is driven really hard. This occurs when the tube rectifier literally can't keep up with the amp's current demand, and so the voltage drops for a few milliseconds. The resulting sag gives the amp a compressed sound and spongy playing field. Before you indignantly cry foul, however, as you may have already heard, the Studio JTM definitely has a nice compressed spongy sound and vintage feel when pushed hard. This is due to the fact that the Studio JTM's 5881 power tubes are cathode biased as opposed to fixed bias like the JTM 45. And, as I'm sure you know, cathode biasing results in more sustained plus compressed dynamics that can sometimes get, well, a little flabby in a very desirable way, incidentally. Fixed bias amps, on the other hand, have a firmer, less compressed sound. I spoke to Marshall's chief designer about the MIA rectifier tube, and he concurred that they felt that the spongy compression resulting from the cathode biasing more than made up for it not being there. Case closed. Sorry, couldn't resist. And yeah, that was pretty darn spongy in a gloriously desirable Sabbath-like way, of course. That said, let's quickly tour the front panel of the ST20H Studio JTM head. Going from right to left, we have the following. Right off the bat, we have 4 inputs, 2 for each of the Studio JTM's 2 channels. And those 2 channels are high treble and normal. The 2 inputs labeled 1 are for the high treble channel, which is voiced for a bright, crisp, fairly aggressive tone. The pair labeled 2 are for the so-called normal channel, which has a rounder, fuller, less aggressive sound. More lows, if you will. And just so you know, the top input for each channel has more gain than the lower one, and hence is louder. And there's no prizes for guessing which ones are used the most. That said, please don't make the mistake of not checking out the other 2 lower inputs, because they really can open up some great tonal options, especially in the studio when you're looking for different sounds and tones and textures. And talking of different sounds, time for a change to a Strat. What a great clean sound, even with my klutzy playing. Wow. Oh, in case you're wondering, these 2 channels aren't foot switchable. It's either one or t'other. That said, as you've already seen and heard, you can blend the two by jumping them together with a patch cable, and we'll mess with that more in a minute. That said, back to the front panel. Next up are the 6 control knobs. The first 2 are the volume controls for the normal and high treble channels, respectively, and they're labeled normal loudness 2 and high treble loudness 1. Loudness, I like it, and it's very apt because this is a loud 20-watt amp, and I'm using it in 20-watt mode, by the way, because I'm not a wimp today. But at home, I use 5 watts because I am a wimp at home, because people get mad. The next 4 knobs are the usual suspect Marshall tone controls, namely treble, middle, bass, and presence. The first 3 live in the preamp section, while presence works in the power amp, adding more bite to your sound should you need it. And that's it for the controls, my friend. Remember, there are no gain controls lurking on this one. This is a non-master volume, keep it simple amp. Next up is an easy to see dual indicator light followed by a 3-way toggle switch. When this switch is in the middle position, the amp is on standby. When it's in the up mode, it's in low power, namely 5 watts, while all the way down is a full Monty 20 watts high power option, which, like I said, I'm using right now. And then finally, we come to the amp's power switch. The Studio JTM Combo's top panel is obviously identical to the heads, except it goes from left to right as opposed from right to left. And in case you're wondering, to be historically correct, there was a JTM 45 combo. In fact, it's still available as a reissue. I am, of course, referring to the legendary 2x12 30-watt model 1962 Marshall combo, better known by its famous nickname, the Blues Breaker. Before we take a gander at the back panel of the head, let's quickly check out some channel jumping, shall we? And to do that, I'm going to change to my Les Paul. For a lot of players, myself included, the invariable go-to are the following. High treble channel cranked into the high gain input of said channel, namely the top left-hand corner one, which I'm plugged into right now. That said, if I'm smart, and sometimes I am, if I want to add some of the body from the normal channel, I can do the following. I take a little patch cable like this, and then plug it into the amp as follows. As you can see, what I've done with the patch cable is this. I've taken it from the low input of the high treble channel into the high input of the normal channel. And then what I do is the following. I dial my sound in on the high treble channel, and then slowly but surely blend in the normal channel using its volume to mix and match the two and get the best of both worlds. Let's check it out. Here's the sound I've just dialed into the high treble channel. That's a pretty darn nice Marshall snarl. Now what I'm going to do is add some body to it by dialing in the normal channel via its loudness control. Let's check it out. I like it. The snarl with some body. The best of both worlds, if you will. But wait! There are other ways you can do this, and the first one is one I learned from Peter Frampton. Peter uses the 4 inputs the other way around, just like this. What he does is the following. First, he plugs into the high gain input of the normal channel, because that's going to be his main channel. Then what he does is he jumps that to the high treble channel, because he's going to blend that in once he's dialed in a sound on the normal channel. Because what he likes is a big fat sound from the normal, then he dials in some of the high treble to give what he calls a little air to his sound. So let's check it out, shall we? Because it works really well with humbuckers. Here's the sound I've just dialed in on the normal channel. Now what I'm going to do is dial in some of the high treble volume to give myself a little bit more air, as Peter calls it. It's subtle, but you can definitely hear and feel it. I can certainly feel it. It's really nice. It also works really well with brighter sounding single cores, like on a Strat, just like this. Here's my normal channel sound with no blend. And now let's dial in some high treble to give it a little bit more edge, a little bit more air, a little more bite. Perfect, subtle, but really cool. Adds body, bite, like I said, best of both worlds. Also, as you probably saw earlier, you can actually do the same jumping using the low inputs as your first input and then jump from the high, so you can blend both low input channels together. Like it. That said, let's take a lightning look at the head's rear panel. First up is an array of 5 clearly labeled speaker outputs which cover all the usual extension cabinet impedance options. Next up is a DI output, and according to the amp's handy dandy quick start guide, this has a loudspeaker emulation added. Nice! Next, there's the send and return jacks for the amp series effects loop, which also features a loop switch button which, when in off position, completely removes the loop from the signal path, should you so wish. This is where I've hooked up the reverb device I'm using for this demo, namely the Earthquaker Ledger's reverb pedal. As I've hopefully already demonstrated, in addition to being able to deliver a plethora of wonderfully harmonically complex vintage overdriven tones, the Studio JTM also has a great clean and push clean sound too. And as you've also heard, it also reacts gloriously with pickups of all shapes and sizes, from humbuckers to P90s to single coils. Oh yeah, and as you'd expect, the Studio JTM responds really well to volume control changes on the guitar, plus picking dynamics and playing nuances too, even when performed by a ham-fisted idiot like myself. Let's quickly check some of that out on a Strat, shall we? It hopefully goes without saying that the Studio JTM head and combo play really well with overdrive and fuzz pedals, and also things like phasers, as you'd expect. And in case you're wondering what I just massacred, sorry Mr. Young, I did via this fine script MXR Phase 90, and the fuzz was delivered by this splendid JHS Bender pedal. Nice! I just saw a pretty high profile video on YouTube referring to the Studio JTM as a reissue. Not sure if that's funny or just plain sad, but I laughed anyway. That said, it's obviously not a reissue, duh! When I spoke to Marshall's head designer recently, he eloquently referred to the Studio JTM as a low-power offering that captures the tonal essence of where it all started. That's very well put, and the only thing I have to add to those words are these. Mission accomplished, Squire. Well played. And there you have it, amigo. The Studio JTM offerings from Marshall. They sound and feel exactly how you'd expect them to, and they're a lot of fun to play. Now, they're obviously not high-gain metal amps, but their warm vintage snarl is perfect for blues, classic rock, and alternative rock too. And boy, do they look great. Check it out. I mean, you've got to have one in your living room, don't you? Right next to the TV. On a personal note, I really enjoyed playing these amps because the JTM's tactile, relatively low-gain crunch really made me play differently. And play less, actually, and I really enjoyed that aspect of them. And I love the cleans and the push cleans, too. They're really, really good. Like I said, inspired me to play differently. Don't know if that's good or bad, but hey, inspiration is good, whatever it sounds like. All the reviews I've seen thus far have been incredibly positive, and deservedly so. In my humble opinion, the Studio JTM family is a wonderful addition to Marshall's already impressive studio range of 20-watt/5-watt tube heads and tube combos and extension cabinets. That said, I'm out of here. If you want more information on this fine JTM offering, or any other Marshall product for that matter, please go to sweetwater.com, or better still, call your oh-so-friendly and helpful Sweetwater sales engineer. Thanks so very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment nicely please, and subscribe. Click here for more videos like this, and go to sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye, toodle pip, see ya, au revoir.